My Journey Transforming Dreams into Actions by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. My first mentor, Ahmed Jalaluddin. A few remarkable people have appeared at critical times in my life and proceeded to mold or reorient my ways of thinking. Sometimes they have even changed the course of my life. To these mentors, I am always grateful and remember them more and more each day. Now, if I could have all the time in the world, I know what I would do. I would spend time in remembering these people who shaped my life. They are like the sun that warms the face and the winds that embrace. One such person in my life was Ahmed Jalaluddin. When I was still a young boy, my father decided to build a boat to start a ferry business. I was fascinated with the way the boat was taking shape. As each plank of wood was slotted into its place and the outline of the boat became clearer, I found it harder and harder to tear myself away from that place by the beach where the boat was being built. Jalaluddin, who also lived in Rameswaram and would help my father, was the first to notice my interest in the boat. Unlike the other adults who were too busy going about their work, he would spend some time chatting with me every day. We would talk about the boat, how it should be built and painted, and all the work that still needed to get done on it. From there, an unusual friendship grew between me, a little boy, and Jalaluddin, a much older, wiser person who was 15 years senior to me. Our conversations gradually took other turns. As days turned into years and both of us grew older, Jalaluddin became my brother in law. He married my sister Zora. Our relationship took on more depth. What I remember most distinctly from the time are our walks around Rameswaram town. We would set out almost every evening, starting from Mosque Street, where our house was located, and walk towards the shore of the sea. The town would be busy at the time with pilgrims making their way to and from the temple. Our first halt would be at the Shiva temple, where our steps would fall in with those making their circumambulations. As they said their prayers, some would be kneeling and touching the ground after every few steps, while others would be helping old parents or relatives perform the pilgrimage. Amongst these people, our thoughts too would turn towards spiritual matters, and our conversation would often be about God. Jalaluddin's relationship with God was slightly different from the one I was used to seeing in my father. My father was a pious man who followed every rule of worship, not just outwardly, but as a deeply felt need within him. Saying the namaz and every other form of prayer was as much a part of his being as breathing or eating. Jalaluddin too was a devout man. However, for him, God was almost like a friend. He talked to God and presented all his problems to him in the way one does to a living entity. For him, it was inconceivable that God would not present a solution if Jalaluddin spoke about his dilemmas to him. As we made our day with the pilgrims, and I watched them perform their rituals and listened to Jalaluddin at the same time, in my mind, these two faiths melded into one. Was it possible that in this serene atmosphere of Rameswaram, the prayers of so many of the faithful, uttered in different tongues and born from various beliefs, were reaching different gods? It could not be. I was convinced that the one who heard everyone out was a common entity. But I also secretly wondered if my friend had a special connection that allowed him to see God everywhere, and it was that which let him speak so freely to him. Jalaluddin was not very highly educated. He had been able to complete his education till the 8th standard only, as he had to start working in order to earn for his family. But he was also among the few in Rameswaram with some knowledge of the English language. He could read and write English and therefore was in great demand among the residents to write their applications or any other official letters. Seeing the respect with which he was treated by the town people, I too wanted to be like him and study as much as possible. On his part, perhaps it was because of his slightly better educational background that Jalaluddin was among the first people to notice the immense curiosity and thirst for knowledge that flowed within me. In those days, I had an insatiable interest to learn more about everything, and it was my brother in law who indulged my questions. I plead him with more and more queries, and he would answer me patiently as he could and with as much knowledge as he had gathered. He opened my eyes when he talked about so many things that lay outside the purview of our daily lives: nature, space, scientific discoveries, books, and famous people. I have often pondered the question: what creates our personalities? How much does the environment play a part, and how much of it is inborn? If I look back at my life, I can put a finger on specific qualities that were transmitted to me from those closest to me. From my parents, I learned honesty, self discipline, faith, and kindness. And from my closest friends, Jalaluddin and my other cousin Samsuddin, I learned to recognize the fact that every human carries something special within himself. These men were the ones who saw a spark in me and encouraged and nurtured me. They were not sophisticated. Rather, they had a direct, intuitive approach to life. They often knew my questions and ambitions even before I had been able to articulate them to my own self. As I grew up, Jalaluddin was among the first to encourage me to break away from the confines of Rameswaram. When I wanted to continue my studies in a bigger school in a different town, he was the one who made the arrangements, travelled with me to Ramanathapuram, and saw me settle into the Squads High School there. For a boy who had not known life outside the place where I had grown up, even Ramanathapuram was a big change. I missed my family, my familiar surroundings, my mother, and her cooking. At that time, it was Jalaluddin who instilled in me the power of positive thinking. He would tell me that I needed to control these emotions in order to fulfill my desires for a better education. Whenever I felt homesick and sad, I thought of him and his words, and they gave me the courage I needed to plunge into an unfamiliar life of a pupil living in a boarding school. At every stage of my life, till I became an adult in the real sense of the word, someone who is in control of his own actions, this man walked with me. He picked me up when I faltered, encouraged me when I felt I could not carry on, and stood by me as I took my first tentative steps in the outside world. How can I forget the day when he and Samsuddin accompanied me to Bombay to Santa Cruz Airport because I was going to do something no one had imagined even 20 years earlier in Rameswaram. I was going to the US, to NASA, on a 6-month training program. I had become an engineer by then and had accepted as a rocket engineer by the Indian National Committee for Space Research, who were sending me to the United States. Jalaluddin and Samsuddin saw me off at Santa Cruz Airport. My trepidation about traveling abroad was reflected in their anxiety about being in a big city like Bombay. Yet, they carried their dignity upon them like a mantle. I recall seeing them at the airport gate and feeling their positivity and optimism reach me in waves. They were men who saw only the good in me and had implicit faith in my following the correct pathways. Standing there, I was overcome by my sentiments and my love for them, and tears filled my eyes. Through the mist of the tears, I held on to them, and Jalaluddin said to me, Abdul, we have always loved you, and we believe in you. We shall always be proud of you. How can I ever forget those words of encouragement? I now think that Jalaluddin not only held my hands and taught me to walk tall in this world, he also taught me how to live. I grew into a man with my own ideas and creative thought process under his influence. An influence that remained with me even when I moved far away from him and my family and made my way in the world. And if he taught me the ways of life, how could it be that he would not teach me the harshest yet most constant fact of life, death? While I was working on the SLV-3 rocket project for the Indian Space Research Organization, news came to me one day that my brother-in-law, my friend and guide, was no more. It was a deep shock for me. Jalaluddin was not of the age for this. When I got the news, I was dumbstruck. How could this have happened? How could we all be alive and this man be no more? In my shock, I remember speaking words that made little sense. I could not think, feel, or move for a time. Finally, I gathered myself together and, leaving instructions with my colleague, I made preparations to leave for Rameswaram. As I travelled back home in buses that wheezed and groaned on the intercity roads, buffeted by people and the wind blowing in from the open windows, amidst the chatter of fellow travellers, I felt myself to be completely alone. Perhaps there comes a time in each of our lives when we finally leave our childhood selves behind, and this was mine. With Jalaluddin, a part of me also passed away. Gone forever was the boy who needed to be guided, who asked questions by the dozen, and who knew that whatever he did, there was a pair of loving hands always ready to hold his own hands and guide them. When I closed my eyes, images from long ago flashed by, of leaving for Ramanthapuram, of Jalaluddin arranging the money to buy my books, of him standing at Santa Cruz airport, tears glistening in his eyes, tears of unbearable pride that can be felt only by those who have truly loved and brought up a child. I saw him walking with me on the sandy shores of our little town, pointing out the stars and moon, explaining where the sun went when it finally sank into the sea. I reached home to find my sister grieving piteously. With her was my little niece Mehboob, her father gone well before his time. I met my father, who was now 100 years old, and yet, for the first time, I felt that he had really aged. The grief of losing his son-in-law seemed to have shifted something within him. We put our dear friend and son to rest, and the whole time I could not find the tears to shed at his going. It was as if I was walking in a daze through a fog of memories. After the burial, my father, the most perceptive man, even in his great old age, held my hands and sat me beside him. For the first time, I noticed that he too had not shed tears. He said to me, Abdul, do you not see how the Lord strengthens the shadows? Had it been His will, He could have made them constant. But He makes the sun their guide. Little by little, He shortens them. He has made the night for us to rest and has sent Jalaluddin into a long sleep, a dreamless sleep, a complete rest of all his being within simple unconsciousness. Nothing happens that has not been ordained by Allah, and in Him we will have to keep our trust and faith. I sat back and reflected on my father's wise words. Death is not something to be afraid of, and I have never seen it in that way. Yet, the sadness that it brings cannot be shrugged away. We will go when our time will come. But when some of us go earlier than the others, like Jalaluddin, who did not live to see his children grow into adults, who did not get to see them married or played with his grandchildren, the sadness that wells up within the heart is a reality that one has to go on living with. My friend Ahmad Jalaluddin was an ordinary man for many, but my friend and mentor Ahmad Jalaluddin was also a remarkable man. He brought about change and shaped the minds of those around with him with sheer power of his love, simplicity, and understanding. There are such remarkable men in every city and village in this country. I was lucky that I found him so near to me and he chose to grasp my hands when he did in order to make me the man I would become one day.